tried to creep on the side of my Jeep. Stuck the heat through the window, rocked their ass to sleep over a 3-pack.
Hello, hello, hello. How are we all doing tonight? I'm happy to get back to y'all with another college football video. Oh, shit was sorry. And season's coming right up around the corner. There's so many videos I want to do and not a lot of time, which means I gotta get off my ass and start pumping these videos out. But tonight we got the Colorado Team Spotlight. This was an interesting. I can't lie to y'all. A lot to talk about, so let's just jump right into it. Colorado Team Spotlight. Let's get right into it. Uh, let's start off with last because uh Colorado is unlike any team I have spotlighted before because they sucked. They were absolutely god awful last season. Um, I just most of these other teams would have had this filled up, starting ranking. They would have been ranked somewhere. Highest ranking certainly would have been the top 25. Lowest ranking, I mean, man, let's not disrespect the Colorado one-game win streak, though. Um, and my ranking is, yeah, certainly not ranked right now. I've seen some people have Colorado as high as 20. We will not name those people because, they do not deserve any attention. But we'll get into why I think Colorado is not, you know, no longer a one-loss team. But we got to talk about it, guys. First of all, to be fair, Colorado, without a doubt, played one of the hardest schedules in college football last season. That is undeniable. I mean, really just look at their schedule. Starting off against the eventual, college football national championship contender TCU. Starting off first, that we didn't know how good TCU was at the time, but a very unlucky draw for Colorado at the start of last season. Air Force ended up being just a high-powered offense. So again, unlucky for Colorado. Minnesota, I mean, yeah, but I mean, giving up to 49 to Minnesota, I mean, come on, guys. But here's the thing: Colorado played all of the top six Pac. There were 6 teams in the Pac-12 that won at least 9 games last season, I think. Colorado played all of them. And if you look at the end of the season, they played four. They played the 4 best teams in the Pac-12 back to back to back to back. No bye week. That is tough. That 4-game stretch there at the end of the season for Colorado. That might have been the toughest stretch. That might have been the toughest stretch in the country. And they had a week 3 bye. That was just so they just got poor Colorado, man. They just got beat up. Oregon, USC, Washington, Utah. Man, gave up at least 49 to all of them. Yikes. Man, guys, first of all, this game against Cal needs to be studied because against every other opponent, Colorado gave up at least 38 points in 11 games. And then out of fucking nowhere, here comes Cal to stink up the field. 13. Guys, if we're going into a game and I know the other team averages about 50 points a game and we put up 13 and we're their only win of the season, Aaron Rodgers and Marshawn Lynch are rolling over in their graves. Even though they're live, they have to denounce all affiliation to Cal after that game right there. Man, that needs to be studied right there. But yeah, Colorado, we all know, right? Colorado was the worst team, at least the worst Power 5 team in the country last season. Let's get into the stats. Offensively, horrible. Uh, couldn't couldn't throw or run the ball. I actually think it's pretty surprising they got 108 rushing yards a game, to be honest. They couldn't throw their quarterback play last season. I'm not here to disrespect anybody, but it was not D1, level quarterback play. 15.4 points per game. I mean, come on. People say the Pac-12 doesn't play defense. Pac-12 wasn't letting Colorado put up many points, except for Arizona State. Colorado somehow, some way put up 34 in Arizona State. But yeah, Colorado was not what you would call a high-powered offense. Offensive line, 1.92 sacks per game. We've covered several teams that have given up more sacks than that per game. So, certainly something you can point to. If you want to point to a bright spot, I would point to the fact that they did not give up that much pressure. Well, even though sacks does not equate to pressure, It's pretty, that's pretty good. 53rd in the country, that's not that bad. 22 turnovers, though, obviously, in only 12 games, you'd like to have a lot less than 22 turnovers. But defensively, guys, this was the worst defense in the country. I, I thought about saying that for a second, but yeah, without a doubt. I mean, second to last in yards per game. I don't know who the hell was behind them, but man, you got to be ashamed of yourself. 510. I'm rounding up 510 yards a game, guys. If you were playing Colorado, it was happy hour. You were going off if you were playing Colorado. 264.7 passing yards per game. We've actually probably seen some teams. I think UNC actually gave up more passing yards per game than that, but that's right in line with a couple of teams we've talked about. Uh, two, this number right here, 245 rushing yards per game. Are you fucking kidding me? That not only was it the worst in college football, but that might be the worst in like a several year stretch. I might actually have to go fact check that. But man, 245. God, 44.5 points. I mean, that's not even surprising to me at this point. Putting together this schedule, like I took this game by game and, wrote the score down. And I was like, once I got to like Oregon State and saw they gave up 42 to Oregon State, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, they gave up 40 plus. So that number didn't even surprise me. They got on average a sack and a half every 2 games. So the fearsome foursome, the purple people eaters, Legion of Boom, whatever you want to call that pass rush, it was dominant with a sack every couple games. And then 11 takeaways, quite frankly, more than I would have guessed, almost a takeaway a game, they weren't dead last in that. But man, to be dead last. So they stopped the run, worse than anybody else in college football. And they also just elected to not get. It's a very interesting strategy of not stopping the run or the pass. They bend, they got the bend don't break, mantra out there. They bent and were broken on defense. So really revolutionary. Colorado last season needs to be studied so it can never happen again because oh man, that's so when we get to this right here of their key losses, some of us would say there's not really many key losses from that team. I would attest though, some of their weapons, especially in this receiving core, and these two right here, Jordan Tyson, Montana Craig, they were both transfers. I would argue those were actually some pretty big losses because their quarterback play last season, let me tell you, it was not great. So I would actually say that losing those two guys did actually hurt because to put up 470 yards and 359 yards respectively with what they had last season, that was pretty impressive. So that, I'd point to that and say, okay, not everybody was a scrub last season. Deion Smith also transferring out, did not want to play under his namesake, the new head coach. Defensively, Nico Reed to Oregon, I think he might have been the best DB from last season, at least cover DB. But yeah, some of us would say that there were no key losses for Colorado. Not entirely true, but I definitely get where you're coming from. This look, guys. So 57 players, I believe, entered the transfer portal from Colorado. 57. 12 were without a team. One decided to come back to Colorado. So 57 entered the transfer portal. One came back, 12 without a team. 46 players transferred in. And who knows how many of these 12 players, because, the season starts within like a month, I think. So I'm assuming a lot of those guys will end up coming back. But we will never see. Bold prediction, we will never see an overhaul like we see right now at Colorado. It has been a perfect storm of the new transfer portal rules, what you can do for a first-year head coach as far as bringing in new players. This is we will never see anything like this again. It is absurd. How many players are involved in this? 90, 102, 103 players involved in the Colorado transfer portal. It's absurd. So first of all, I want to just break down to show the level of talent. And again, not to disrespect, I couldn't make my high school JV team if I dedicated my whole life to it. Okay, so I'm not trying to disrespect anybody here. but it is certainly fair to say that Colorado didn't have certainly not a lot of Power Five talent on it last season. I think that's a fair point to say. So let's take a look at these 44 players that transferred out. 44, that's a big number, guys. 44. Less than a third of them transferred to Power Five schools. So is that a good indicator of maybe how much of Colorado's roster last season was at a Power Five level? I'd say so. I'd say, about a third, maybe closer to 40%, but certainly not up to their competition. I mean, that kind of played itself out. 21 transferred to other non-Power 5 Division 1 schools. 9 players transferred to D2 or even D3 schools in some case. 12 players right here without a team. If you couldn't have found a team and all the time you were in the transfer portal, is it more or less likely that these guys are Power 5 level talent here? Because if these 12 guys right here, if they were uber talented, would they not have been picked up by now by somebody? So I'm leaning to believe that these 12 guys right here are in one of these two categories right here, either non-Power 5 D1 level or even D2 level. So certainly, I'm not here to debate the ethics of what Coach Prime has done as far as, kicking out, 56 players here from the program, because I do believe that it was necessary. If you really just take a look at what Colorado was last season, there are no tears being shed for the talent that they lost in the transfer portal. Let me just put it that way. But taking a look at the guys they brought in. So keep in mind here, 14 players left that were Power 5 caliber. In the transfer portal, in one cycle, Deion Sanders brought in 24 Power 5 players. So not only did you replace the talent that you lost per se, you added in 10 more guys of a Power 5 level. And then the guys that weren't Power 5, let's take a look at the D2 players. 14 D2 players transferred in. 9 were from Jackson State. Is it fair to, some of those guys include Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, Shiloh Sanders. Is it fair to assume that a lot of those Jackson State guys were 3, 4-star, 5-star players in Travis Hunter's case out of high school? So I would say a lot of those guys are also Power 5 level talent. So really, you got an overhaul of the roster, but an overhaul where you come out of it far better than what you started with. I would say the talent level of this team at least doubled, possibly even tripled, as far as just the amount of 4 or 5-star not many 5-star, but 3, 4, 5-star players that could play anywhere. That's the point I'm trying to make here. I would say only about a third last season of Colorado's players could play anywhere on a Power 5 level. This season, I think it's over 50% now that could play on any Power 5 team in the country. So that's the point I'm trying to get across. And just to hammer home the amount of transfer players they have, let's take a look at Colorado's depth chart here, because it is something. Yellow indicates that the player is either a transfer player or a freshman. And if they're blue, that means they're from last season's team. How many blue players? Let's take a look here. How many blue players do you guys see are starters here? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, and a punt returner. 5. 5 out of what? 30 positions listed here are from last year's roster. That's absurd, guys. That is ridiculous. That's absurd. And their tight end didn't play last season. One of them's a punt returner. Not that many. And just look at the backups, too. Look at how many backups. Oh, my God. You have about 90% of Colorado's starters and backups coming from the transfer portal or being freshmen that didn't play on last year's team. That is absurd, guys. That is ridiculous. We will never see anything like this again, ever. This is ridiculous. But back to the team. So I've gone over now who they lost, the amount of talent that they brought in via the transfer portal. Let's take a look at some of these guys. And I got 16 players listed here, offense and defense. Only one was on last year's team. So take that for what you will. Talking first to the quarterback, Shedeur Sanders coming in Jackson State, 4-star quarterback out of high school. And, to be quite frank, he dominated. the Division II level at Jackson State. Say what you want about the level of competition, you cannot argue with his personal play. What I liked, obviously the stats were just last season, almost 4,000 yards, 46 touchdowns. He took great care of the football. His touchdown to interception ratio was like 5-1, I believe, maybe even more than that. So I love the fact that he took care of the football. And he doesn't just have 1 year of experience. He played 2 years at Jackson State. So he's coming in, I would say, more than capable. This is not a guy who is like, fresh. I would say he has more, upside and experience than a lot of other quarterbacks in the Pac-12. I mean, I'm not trying to heap any expectations on Shedeur Sanders, but I think it is very likely that by the end of the season, we are saying Shedeur Sanders was a top 20 quarterback in the FBS. I don't think that's a bold take at all. I think he is that talented and he has the experience. Looking into the running back room, Alton McCaskill did not play last season at Houston. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because injury or whatever. But in 2021, guys, 18 total touchdowns and over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, over 5 yards per touch, 210 touches. This is very interesting. Again, I don't know why he didn't play last season. That could have a big impact on his, obviously on his level of play this season. But if they can get some of that from the 2021 season, that is just a massive, massive upgrade at running back. And not even, obviously, quarterback, you're getting 3 or 4 times the level of player you had previously. But that running back position, if Alton McCaskill can, replicate even 80% of what he did in 2021, that is a massive get for Colorado. And then Kavosiey Smoke out of Kentucky. This is his 6th year, guys. I think he had maybe a redshirt season or an injury, and then he got an extra year for COVID. This man is like 24 years old. This is a grown man out there playing in the Pac-12. If something were to happen to McCaskill or he does not step up to the plate, I'm sure Kavosiey Smoke could fill that role perfectly fine. So that running back room, I have no concerns with it. I, am very excited to watch it and see how they perform. As far as the receiver room is concerned, I mean, pretty simple here. They brought in 2 guys from Jackson State, Travis Hunter and Willie Gaines, and they brought in 2 guys from USF, Jimmy Horn, Xavier Weaver, and also bringing in Javon Antonio from North Dakota or South Dakota State, somewhere like that. So the wide receiver room, I honestly would say, was the strength of this Colorado team last season, but most of those guys are gone, completely overhauled, and I think they came out the better for it. If I had to name, I think the USF guys are going to be the 2 most important players here. Xavier Weaver certainly, I think, is the number 1 receiver. Over 700 yards in just 9 games last season. Certainly, I would point to him. And then Jimmy Horn, over 600 yards from scrimmage last season. Travis Hunter, he's listed as a starter on the depth chart. I'm not really sure. It's one thing to play 2 ways in Division II, but playing 2 ways, in a Power 5 conference with how much he's going to have to give as probably the number 1 corner, I'm not sure how much of Travis Hunter we're going to see offensively this season. Certainly, and situationally maybe, because he does provide a good amount of size to this receiver room, but I do not expect, Travis Hunter to be just a mainstay, especially over guys like Javon Antonio or even Willie Gaines also coming over from Jackson State. So I love the chemistry here, because Xavier Weaver and Jimmy Horn, obviously teammates from USF, and then Shedeur Sanders already having that experience throwing to Travis Hunter and to Willie Gaines coming in. So they have a good, matchup, or what should I say, assembly of guys with size, speed, athleticism, and also guys who have chemistry with each other. So this offense should just, leaps and bounds better. But that's kind of obvious, right? But this should be, and we're going to take a look at their schedule and the fact they don't really play a good defense for a while. This could be a high-powered, explosive offense, and I'm excited to see it. Defensively, obviously, we mentioned the worst in college football last season. So, as you can see, I got 8 guys listed here. Only one of them was from last season. So, a complete overhaul was necessary, and I'm glad it happened. Let's take a look at the front 7 first. Starting on the left-hand side there, we got Jordan Domineck coming in. His 7.5 sacks, what they have, 17 all of last season. Certainly they're taking that from Jordan Domineck. bringing in Leonard Payne, Shane Copes, and then Derek McClendon coming from Florida State. I mean, all you guys need to know is that it's so much better than what they had last season. I mean, what else is there to say? I guess the only concern with the front seven is that maybe I don't even know the lack of, chemistry. I don't even know. That all you guys have to know is that it's a massive improvement, really. And taking a look at the secondary, fair concerns here. Obviously, I already mentioned Travis Hunter. Cormani McClain, I'm not sure if he was the top cornerback from this previous class, but he was a five-star who chose to team up with Travis Hunter. And both, guys wanting to play for Coach Prime, completely understandable. So Coach Prime is going to have two five-star cornerbacks, on the outside. Cormani McClain, true freshman, is going to start for them. Only concern would be for me is that both of these guys are incredibly young. Neither of these guys have played a snap of Division I football, and they're both going to be starters in the Pac-12 against some very high-powered offenses. So they're going to get beat a lot. But unlike last season, Colorado now has a couple guys outside who can make some big-time plays. So I'm very excited to see how that plays out. Obviously, Shiloh Sanders, another one of Deion's kids transferring in. Is this his fourth? This might be his fourth or maybe even his fifth year. He played 2 years at South Carolina, I believe, and then two at Jackson State. I think that he's a fifth-year player. Had D1 talent out the gate to get recruited to South Carolina, chose to go to Jackson State. Now his fifth year, expect a lot from him. And then Trevor Woods, certainly I think you could make a case. The best Colorado player from last season that comes back, 79 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and an INT. Certainly one of the only bright spots for that defense last season, kind of the last Colorado player standing from that defense. I think he is their only starter from last season's team that returns defensively. So keep an eye on him. I'm excited to see what he does. But yeah, I mean, what can you say except that this will be an entirely different team from the coaching staff to the players? It's not the same team. So I almost didn't even want to show what they did last season because it kind of has no bearing on this current team. It's just completely different. So let's take a look now on what I think. Well, not what I think, just the expectations for Colorado. What should we expect? And let's be realistic here, because a lot of people, I've seen just so many horrible takes back and forth about Colorado this season. It's important to be realistic. Worst case scenario, they go to TCU and get embarrassed in week 1. I'm talking 20 plus points, an absolute blowout. That could hurt their confidence, because Deion has said that's, they're going to go in and give it everything they have in week 1 against TCU. And if they were to just get blown out, that could play a big role in kind of derailing their season before it even starts. Shedeur Sanders, if he struggles, certainly it holds the rest of the offense back, certainly. So he is going to be the key to the whole offense, and if he struggles, it's going to be tough for them to get off their feet. The run game, it's new players and it's new players across the board, so it's not a guarantee that they have a great run game, especially if Shedeur Sanders struggles. My bad. So it's not a guarantee. So if that's not consistent, if they struggle to get short yardage gains, that will certainly hurt them. I mentioned defense getting 0.75 sacks a game. If that somehow remains, even though they don't have any of the same players in the front seven, but if they can still not get pressure, that would be an issue, certainly. I already mentioned the young DBs. They have a chance to really just get bullied, out-muscled, and outclassed against every receiving core they play. I mean, they don't play Washington, but they play Oregon, they play Utah, they play USC. Things could get bad quickly for that, that secondary. And, obviously getting swept by USC, Oregon, Utah, Oregon State, most people already expect that, but if that were to happen, certainly I'm assuming Colorado would love to pull off at least one win against those top Pac-12 teams. And I don't like talking about this, but it is, it should be mentioned that Deion has had a lot of health complications recently involving blood clots in his foot, I believe. So obviously not hoping for anything like this, but it should be mentioned that, Primetime could miss some time due to some health issues. So if that all took place, I think 3-9 is possible. It would be very disappointing, but we have to remember in year one, with all the overhaul this roster took to improve 2 games, and certainly in this case, they would still, guys, they got blown out every single game except for Cal. So in this situation, you win 2 more games than you did last year, and you're certainly competitive, and you're way more watchable. I mean, last season, I don't know many Colorado fans, but I'm sure it was tough to turn on games last season. This season, at bare minimum, they're going to be an entertaining team with a lot of promise. So 3-9, I think 2-7 in conference play is reasonable, and again, a 2-win improvement from last season. You can't get worse. This team's not going to fucking win this. More realistic, very realistic in my opinion, would be you go to TCU, you play them close, you give yourself a little bit of confidence. You don't win the game, but you give yourself a little bit of confidence moving forward. QB play, a massive upgrade. I already mentioned this. Shedeur Sanders, he doesn't light the world on fire, but he gives you a lot more of a chance than you had last season. The run game is complementary. McCaskill wasn't dominant, but like I said, he maintained some of that form he had in 2021. Defense, you got to take a step forward. I mean, it can't be worse, but looking at some of the teams they play, it would be understandable if they're not, lighting the world on fire. The DBs, you force more turnovers than you forced last season. Certainly an area that I could see a lot of improvement in. You steal a game from either Nebraska, UCLA, or Arizona, and you're a respectable team in the Pac-12. I doubt they'd finish last in this situation, the most likely situation. So I got them at a 5-7 record here. You win 3 or maybe even 4 conference games. We'll get into their schedule in a second, but a 4-game improvement from last season. This is my problem. A lot of people would call this a disappointment for Colorado. We on this channel call those people idiots. If you think 5-7 is a disappointment for Colorado, you got to adjust your expectations, because this team won 1 game last season, was one of the worst teams in all of FBS, certainly in the Power 5, the worst team. To win 4 more games than you did last season, I don't care where you are, what team, what level of football. If you win 4 more games than you did the previous season, that's a major improvement and should be recognized as such. If you think 5-7 is a disappointment for Colorado next season, I don't know what to tell you. You're too far gone. But let's get into the best case. Not half full, glass half full, half empty, fully empty, overflowing. What could Colorado be if everything goes right? Well, certainly you would have to say they win 2 out of their 3 first games. 2 out of their 3 first games, whether it's TCU or Nebraska, they certainly have to beat one of those games and then mop the floor with Colorado State. Shedeur Sanders, like I mentioned, would have to play like a top 20 quarterback, and he has the weapons to do it. It's all on him. You can't say that Colorado does not have a running game anymore. He has the running game. I think he will have the receivers. It's up to Shedeur Sanders. Running game, I already mentioned. McCaskill, Kavosier Smoke, certainly able to contribute and be much better than they were last season. Offensive line, I already mentioned. Offensive line, as far as giving up pressure, was not bad last season. And you would hope that it only gets better. They returned 2 starters, but 3 transfers in. I would assume the only way is up defensively. They were last in the FBS in sacks. That has to improve. How much can it improve? If at least doubling that. That still wouldn't be great, but I mean, getting nearly 2 sacks a game, you would hope that's the case for Colorado this year. Nearly 20 turnovers forced. I think this is very important, because you look at a team like USC last season, we don't think of them as a good defense whatsoever, but they were top 5 in the country in turnovers forced. So if you can do that, it can, kind of hide a lot of your other flaws defensively. So they would also have to beat Stanford, Arizona, and Arizona State, and then you'd have to probably steal a win in this scenario versus a Utah, or Oregon, or USC. That would result in a 6-6 regular season. I think they'd have all the momentum to go out and win a bowl game, and that would be a 6-win improvement. This, I know Deion has said in interviews that he wants to go undefeated. He wants to win the national championship. Sure, he has to say that. But this would be just the dream scenario for Colorado, and they would have all the momentum in the world going into the next season. But this is the best case, because you're just not gonna go from a 1-win team to a 10-win team. It's not gonna happen ever. Well, I guess shit, you saw Tulane, but for most Power 5 teams, it's not going to happen. This would just be excellent. In a stacked Pac-12 conference, for Colorado to knock off a couple teams and win 6 games and then win a bowl game, that would be excellent. Now, let's get into what I think. My favorite part of these videos is not even close. This is my little treat I give to y'all who stays through the whole video and watch to the end with me. Let's break down their schedule. Here is my interpretation of it, and you guys can have your own interpretation. You can leave your comments what your predictions are, but let's go game by game. I do not think they're going to beat TCU week 1. I just don't think so. However, I do think it will be a close game. Colorado will have their moments certainly, but I do have TCU pulling it out 28-20. Then the next week against Nebraska, I do have Colorado pulling that one out. And this is where it kind of starts. Tell me where the great defense is in their schedule. Certainly early. I don't think they play a very good defense until Oregon State in week 10. So I think they're going to have a lot of time to figure it out offensively, and they may even get rolling. I think it's going to start with a 30-piece against Nebraska and a close win there. Not a bad Nebraska team anymore with their coaching change. And then against Colorado State, one of the worst teams in FBS last year. This has to be your confidence building game. You have to thump Colorado State here. And I think they're going to put up nearly 40 with a 38-17 win. This game against Oregon, I would look at this game. Whether or not they're 2-3 or 1-2 in their first 3 games out of conference, this would be the game because certainly they would be coming off a good game against Colorado State, right? So this would be the game I'd point to really see how good they are. I'm not proposing that they beat Oregon, but if you want to watch one Colorado game to really see the difference, I would watch this Oregon game in week 4. I don't think they're going to stop them because Oregon's offense is electric, but certainly Oregon was not a good defense whatsoever last season. I think Colorado can take advantage of that, and putting up 24 on Oregon I think would be very respectable. And then next week, back to back, tough break there, Oregon and USC. Similar, almost the same story, I guess you could say. I don't think they'll be able to slow USC down, but certainly I think 27 on that defense is certainly reasonable. So back-to-back games where you can point to that and say, hey, they did a lot better against these teams than they did last season. That is kind of a example, evidence of how much they improved. And then I think they're gonna rack off some wins here. Coming off USC, I think Arizona State, they laid it on them last season, but they also Colorado, I think they put up 34 in Arizona State last season. So certainly I think they'll be able to, offensively get themselves together in week 6, pick up a win there. Stanford has been bad for a while. I don't see that changing this year. I got Colorado by 10. And then UCLA. This is the only game I'm willing to come out and say that they're going to steal. Or I say that I think they play 6, they play 6 out of the 7 best teams in the Pac-12 if you ask me. UCLA is the only one that I think they could beat. Because I think this is the game where you could point to and say, Shedeur Sanders is almost certainly going to outperform Dante Moore, whoever the starter is for UCLA. I will give Colorado this game in week 9. And at this point, they'd be 5-3. They would be 5-3 with a winning record in conference play. The hype would be ridiculous. But I do think Oregon State will knock them off, kind of kill the hype train, if you want to say. I have that, and that is the first good defense that I think Colorado will play in the entire season up to that point. So I have them losing that one. Then I have them coming back, high-scoring affair, beating Arizona. In their last 2 games, Washington State, certainly a winnable game. I'm not saying this is just out of reach, but I do like Cameron Ward and the Washington State Cougars, so I have them taking that one. And then Utah, that's a tough draw. At the end of the season, that's a tough draw. I have Utah handling Colorado rather easily. So that would be 6-6. That would be a bowl game for Colorado, an absolute, success of a season. I don't care what anybody says. And then this is one of my favorite parts because how the hell am I going to predict what bowl? How am I going to predict their opponent? Well, what I would like to see, maybe Kansas goes 7-5 in the regular season. That's perfectly reasonable for Kansas to have a winning record, make a bowl game as well. I would love to see Colorado versus Kansas. Shedeur Sanders versus Jalen Daniels. That would be must-watch TV if you ask me. And let's just say Colorado pulls that off. There's no skill in predicting anything like that, but I'll give Colorado the nod there. So in summary, I am drinking a bit of the Colorado Kool-Aid. Now, let's be real here. I may be 2 or even 3 games over reality, but I do not think that Colorado has any real excuse. I mean, outside of the TCU, Oregon, USC, and Utah games, I don't think they have a massive roster disadvantage in any single game they play this year. Even TCU, you could argue that their roster is pretty, similar as far as talent is concerned. So I do think Colorado, with all the changes they've made, will be more than capable of at least hanging in every single game this season. So 7-6 record, obviously missing the Pac-12 championship, winning a bowl game and a 6-win improvement from the year before. And if nothing else, guys, if you just want some evidence of how much Coach Sanders has changed this program in not even a year, like half a year. If I had the money and the means, if my job was sitting down and just watching college football and Colorado had some type of Texas type of station I could subscribe to, I would watch every single Colorado game this year. Can you believe that? The worst Power 5 team in college football. In one off season, I would watch every game that they played. If that's not all the evidence you need of how much this team has changed, that's it for you right there. That's going to be it for this video, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed. I had so much fun putting this together. And, shit, what was it? I had so much fun putting this together. Next video, I do believe will be the Alabama video. I've been working on it for a while. I've been wanting to make it for a while, so be on the lookouts for that. That is going to be some hot takes thrown around in that video. But thank you if you are still watching, have made it to this point. College football is around the corner. I am starting to figure out my scheduling on how to pump these videos out more efficiently. And thanks for watching. Peace.
It's out the motherfucking pack. Right out the niggas don't know how to act.